Good evening, everyone. Welcome to No Sleep Scary Stories with me, your host, Screams and Dreams. I hope you all are ready for this nightmare land of stories collected. I'll see you in your nightmares. I'm now 23F. I was walking home from work at the local pizza joint and took my usual route home. It was about 9:45 to 10:15 p.m. As I'm getting about 100 yards away from the street I live on, a white van turns onto that street. Nothing suspicious, but something didn't sit right with me, so I yanked out my earbuds and paused my music. I then turned down my street, and as I'm getting closer to my house, I started getting a weird gut feeling. I look up from my phone as I was about to text my roommate, who was out of town at the time, that I was almost home, about 15 yards or so. As I look up, I notice the white van sitting in front of my house, and the man inside is just staring at me, the yellow car light shining on his face. He had brown hair, glasses, and facial hair. His van lights were off, but his car was running. I stopped and put my back to a tree in my neighbor's yard and just stood there, maintaining eye contact with this man. After about what seemed like eternity, probably like 5 minutes minimum, he starts driving towards the stop sign at the end of the road. I didn't put my back to him. I kept my back to the tree and maintained visual on the van the entire time until it stopped at the stop sign. He just sat there for probably 2 to 3 minutes, all while I'm not looking away and my back's still on the tree. Finally, he turned right, the direction in which I had come from, and after about 20 seconds of making sure he or anybody else wasn't coming, I bolt to my house. I quickly get inside and lock the door. I go to the window and very quietly look through the blinds. I didn't turn on any lights because I'm not stupid. After a few seconds of looking, he drove back up and down the street and left again. Afterwards, I texted my roommate what happened, and then went to each and every one of the windows in my house to make sure that they were locked, along with the back door and garage door. I made sure to keep all lights off for the remainder of the night. I didn't sleep a lick that night. I was so paranoid at any sound or movement. Let's just say I never walked home after that. To the man in the van, let's not meet again. The Thing. Ted Martin and Sam Miller were good friends. They spent a lot of time together. On this particular night, they were sitting on a fence near the post office, talking about whatever was on their mind. There was a field of turnips across the road. Suddenly, they saw something crawl out of the field and stand up. It looked like a man, but in the dark, it was hard to tell for sure. Then it was gone, but soon it appeared again. It walked halfway across the road, then it turned around and went back into the field. Then it came out a third time and started walking towards them. By now, Ted and Sam were scared and they started running, but when they finally stopped, they decided they were being foolish. They weren't sure what had scared them, so they decided to go back and get a better look. Pretty soon they saw it, for it was coming to meet them. Sam said, "I'm gonna try and touch it. Then we'll know if it's real." He walked up to it and peered into its face. It had bright, penetrating eyes, sunk deep in its head. It looked like a skeleton. Ted took one look and screamed, and again he and Sam ran. But this time the skeleton followed them. When they got to Ted's house, they stood in the doorway and watched it. It stayed out in the road for a while, then it disappeared. A year later, Ted got sick and died. Toward the end, Sam sat up with him every night. The night Ted died, Sam said he looked just like a skeleton. r/no sleep. User EaPATbp. Hi everyone. My name is Ava, and yesterday was my 8th birthday. Hi everyone. My name is Ava Wayne, and today I am 8 years old. I was 8 yesterday for the first time, but now I'm even older. I got to use my mom's computer today, but shh, don't tell her. Last night, when my dad came home from work, he brought me a big chocolate cake with vanilla frosting that had my name on it, and I got to blow out the candles. I didn't even have to eat dinner first. It was the best day, even though I didn't have a party. It doesn't matter though, because I've never had a party before. My mom and dad say that I'm not allowed because we can't have any other people in the house. They lie and tell me that it's because we live too far away, but I know that it is because of my friend Evie who lives with us. Evie looks exactly like me, and we are like sisters. She is not really my sister though. We just say that. Evie can do this really cool trick where she can move my arms and say things in my voice. Sometimes it is a little bit annoying, but she's my friend, so it's okay. My mom and dad don't like Evie though, and this makes her very mad. My mom says that Evie needs help and we have to see someone for her. I don't know what she means, but Evie says that my mom is a liar, and I don't like telling Evie that she is wrong. My dad gets really mad and yells at Evie to stop and to shut up and leave me alone, but that just makes her more mad. I've tried to tell him to stop, but he doesn't listen. Yesterday, when my dad brought home the cake, he asked me if I liked it, and I told him yes, and that Evie liked it too. He got really mad, but my mom told him that it was not the time, and he didn't say anything about her. When they lit the candles and told me to make a wish, I didn't know what to wish for. I kind of wanted some new paints so that I could make more paintings for my room, but I also wanted a puppy or some new toys. Mostly I wanted to wish for Evie to stay, but Evie thought that was a stupid wish because she says she's always going to be with me forever, so I didn't wish for that. I asked Evie what else I should wish for, and my dad got really mad and told me to just make a wish already because this was none of Evie's business. That made me a little bit sad because it was Evie's business, and she was with us, and that was rude of him to yell at her like that. My mom said it was okay, but Dad said that it was not normal. Evie was also getting mad because Dad said she wasn't normal. Everyone was just mad, and I almost cried. But then Evie told me to just make my wish because she would make any of my wishes come true. I thought about it really hard, but then Mom told me to hurry up or else the cake was going to get ruined. So I finally decided to wish for my parents to leave Evie alone and be nice to her. Then I blew out the candles, and my mom clapped, but I could tell that my dad was still mad. We ate cake anyway, but I didn't ask if Evie could have some because it was finally a good time. We finished the entire cake all by ourselves, and I was even allowed to have 2 whole pieces. It was awesome. Last night, I had a really scary nightmare that I stabbed my mom and my dad in their bed when they were asleep. It was really scary, and I woke up and cried, but I don't think they heard me because no one came to check on me. Only Evie was there, and she said it was okay. When it was morning, I got up, but my mom didn't make any breakfast, and she didn't answer when I was yelling for her. Evie says that they are still asleep and that I shouldn't go up to their room, so I didn't. Evie helped me to make breakfast. She showed me how to make a burrito with eggs and some chicken that she bought. It was really messy because Evie said that it was fresh meat that had just been killed. I already know Grandpa has a farm, and I had seen them make a turkey before, so I knew that it was very messy. After I ate, Evie said that we could watch TV. She said that I didn't even have to clean up because Mom and Dad weren't going to even see it. She told me that she made my wish come true, and that they weren't going to be mad at us anymore, and they weren't going to yell at us either. Evie says that now we can do whatever we want. I had ice cream and I watched cartoons all morning instead of going to school, and when the phone rang and the school called, Evie talked to them and she sounded just like my mom. She told them that I was sick, and the lady believed her. It was so fun, and I didn't even know that she could do that. Evie let me use my mom's laptop because she says she knows the password. She told me I could write on here like a diary and post it so other people could read it. Isn't that so cool? I wonder who is reading this. Evie just made me lunch, and it was a sandwich with meat again. I don't eat this much meat because my mom likes for me to eat my veggies, but Evie says that Mom is not the boss anymore, so I can eat whatever I want. I had a lot of chips, and my tummy started to hurt, and I really wanted my mom. But Evie said that it was okay, and she could make it feel better. Evie told me to take a nap, and so I did. But I had another scary dream that I was cutting up Mom and Dad because Evie was making me. When I woke up, Evie said it was just a dream because Mom and Dad were still asleep upstairs. I want to go and see them, but Evie says I can't, or else it will ruin the wish, and we will get in big trouble for making a mess and eating junk. I think I'm gonna go play hide and seek with Evie now. Love, Ava. Wolf pelt he turned in. A butcher in town named Bill Williams thought that was pretty good money. He stopped working as a butcher and started killing wolves. He was good at it. Every year he killed over 500 of them. That came to more than $5,000. It was quite a bit of money in those days. After 4 or 5 years, Bill had killed so many wolves there were hardly any left in that area. So he retired, and he vowed never to harm another wolf because wolves had made him rich. Then one day, a farmer reported that a white wolf had killed 2 of his sheep. He had shot at it and hit it, but the bullets didn't have any effect. Soon, that wolf was seen all over the countryside, killing and running, but nobody could stop it. One night, it came into Bill's yard and killed his pet cow. Bill forgot about his decision never to harm another wolf. He went into town the next morning and bought a young lamb for bait. He took it out into the hills and tied it to a tree. Then he backed off about 50 yards and sat down under another tree. With his gun in his lap, he waited. When Bill didn't come back, his friends started looking for him. Finally, they found the lamb. It was still tied to a tree. It was hungry, but it was alive. Then they found Bill. He was still sitting against the other tree, but he was dead. His throat had been torn open, but there was no sign of a struggle. His gun hadn't been fired, and there were no tracks in the soil around him. As for the white wolf, it was never seen again. Room for one more. A man named Joseph Blackwell came to Philadelphia on a business trip. He stayed with friends in the big house they owned outside the city. That night, they had a good time visiting, but when Blackwell went to bed, he tossed and turned and couldn't sleep. Sometime during the night, he heard a car turn into the driveway. He went to the window to see who was arriving at such a late hour. In the moonlight, he saw a long, black hearse filled with people. The driver of the hearse looked up at him. When Blackwell saw his hideous face, he shuddered. The driver called to him, "There's room for one more." Then he waited for a minute or two, and he drove off. In the morning, Blackwell told his friends what had happened. "You were dreaming," they said. "I must have been," he said, "but it didn't seem like a dream." After breakfast, he went into Philadelphia. He spent the day high above the city in one of the new office buildings there. Late in the afternoon, he was waiting for an elevator to take him back down to the street. But when it arrived, it was very crowded. One of the passengers looked out and called to him. "There's room for one more," he said. It was the driver of the hearse. "No thanks," said Blackwell. "I'll get the next one." The doors closed and the elevator started to go down. There was shrieking and screaming, then the sound of a crash. The elevator had fallen to the bottom of the shaft. Everyone on board was killed. r/creepy stories. User Staceyroseisme. My father told me a story about when he was a young man, about 19 or 20 years old, and still living at home with his parents. This was before he met and fell in love with my mother. He said the time that this happened to him, it was very late at night, and he was walking home from work. His parents' house was about 2 or 3 miles away from work, so it was quite the walk, but since he had walked it daily, it was nothing new to him. Usually, though, he'd work the day shift, but since someone called in sick for the evening shift, he got called in, and he decided he'd take the shift because he was saving up money to get his own place. By the time my father started walking home, it was well past midnight. Since it was warm out, instead of calling a cab, he decided to walk that way home. He knew his mother would be waiting up for him because she always worried and she wouldn't go to sleep until he was home. About halfway home, my father started feeling like he wasn't alone anymore. He said he had that uneasy feeling, like he should hurry home before something bad would happen, but he didn't want to give in to his fears, so he just continued walking. Eventually, he started to hear footsteps behind him, and he looked back and got the scare of his life. What he described to me was a man dressed in dark clothing who was tall, but the only thing off about this man is that he had no face. When my father stopped, this man stopped. When my father walked, this man would walk. My father was scared and knew his best bet was to get home because he felt he would be safe at home. Soon enough, my father was able to see his parents' house with all the lights on. He said that this was his beacon to safety. He could still hear this man walking behind him, but this time it felt like the man was closer than before. My father started to walk faster, and when he got into the driveway, my grandmother opened the door wide and screamed to him to get in the house fast. It was as if she knew something was wrong. My father ran to her and ran inside the house. This faceless man stood at the end of the driveway, and my grandmother screamed at him to be gone. When my father looked out the window, after my grandmother slammed the door shut and locked it, the man had vanished. To this day, both my father and my grandmother believe this faceless man was some kind of demon looking to take my father's soul or something. I often wonder if it was a story they would tell us kids to get us afraid of the dark, but they swear it really happened. My father's side of the family are very religious people, so it's hard for me to believe they would lie about something like this. But then again, they lied about Santa and the Easter Bunny while growing up. What do you all think? Are there really faceless beings out there that mean to do harm to people? Or do you think it was a story that's just passed down from generation to generation? I do believe that there are things that can be unexplained. But sometimes I have to wonder. I am afraid of the dark, though, even as an adult. If I wake up and it's pitch black, I can't breathe and go into a panic attack. So I have to have some kind of light, even if it is one of those cheap night lights parents buy for their children. The walk. My uncle was walking down a lonely dirt road one day. He came upon a man who also was walking down that road. The man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man. The man was scared of my uncle, and my uncle was scared of that man, but they kept on walking, and it began to get dark. The man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man. The man was very scared of my uncle, and my uncle was very scared of that man. But they kept on walking, and they came to a big woodsy area. It was getting darker, and the man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man. The man was really scared of my uncle, and my uncle was really scared of that man, but they kept on walking, and deep down into the woods they went. It was getting darker, and the man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at that man. The man was terribly scared of my uncle, and my uncle was terribly scared of... r/no sleep. User BlairDaniels. Last night, I got a reCAPTCHA. There was something horribly wrong with it. Have you ever seen a photo reCAPTCHA? Instead of a checkbox, it's a low-quality photo split into 16 square sections. It'll say something like, select all squares with street signs, and you'll have to click every square that contains a street sign. At 11 p.m. on Sunday night, I got one while downloading free stock images. It was a photo of a path through the forest. Select all squares with people. Okay, that was easy enough. In the center, there was a jogging woman in pink shorts. She took up a few of the middle squares, and I clicked them all. I pressed verify. It didn't work. Select all squares with people, the message said again. I took off my glasses, placed them on the table, and squinted at the image. No, she wasn't the only person. Several feet off the trail, at the very edge of the image, I could see it. the edge of an arm clad in a black sweatshirt with a pink thumb poking out. I triumphantly clicked the 2 squares containing it. Verify. The image blinked as it refreshed. Then, the same text popped up, as if to taunt me. Select all squares with people. I rubbed my eyes and stared at the image. The trees cast low-resolution, blocky shadows across the path. The woman's ponytail swung to the left mid-motion. Patches of yellow sunlight dappled the surrounding forest. I studied some of the darker shadows far from the path, but none of them matched the silhouette of a person. I glanced to the edge of the image. No. The image had changed. The arm at the edge of the photo was now further in the frame, taking up 3 squares instead of 2. Bulky shoulders and dark jeans followed it, and the jogger was just slightly farther down the path, as if she'd just taken a step. The touchpad was slick under my fingers. My heart pounded in my chest. Slowly, I dragged the cursor over the 3 squares and clicked them all. Verify. The image blinked. Select all squares with people. I leapt back from the computer. The image was different again. The man was further in the frame, taking up 5 squares. His hand was stretched out toward the jogger, just inches from her shoulder, and the jogger, she was turned towards him, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. Click, click, click. I furiously clicked all the squares. Verify. Loading. Select all squares with people. The man's face was finally in frame. The hood of his sweatshirt was pulled tightly over his head. A translucent Halloween mask poked out from underneath, pressed against his features. His hand was latched onto her arm. She was screaming. Click, click, click. Verify. The image disappeared. I'd passed the reCAPTCHA. I reported what I'd seen to the police. At first, they thought I was crazy, but as I gave a detailed description of the images, they frantically took notes and asked me questions. The woman matched the description of a local woman, Kaylee Johnson. She went missing a week ago during an afternoon jog on the wooded Lakewood Trail. She was never found. What do you come for? There was an old woman who lived all by herself, and she was very lonely. Sitting in the kitchen one night, she said, "Oh, I wish I had some company." No sooner had she spoken than down the chimney tumbled 2 feet from which the flesh had rotted. The old woman's eyes bulged with terror. Then 2 legs dropped to the hearth and attached themselves to the feet. Then a body tumbled down. Then 2 arms and a man's head. As the old woman watched, the parts came together into a great gangling man. The man danced around and around the room. Faster and faster he went. Then he stopped, and he looked into her eyes. "What do you come for?" she asked in a small voice that shivered and shook. "What do I come for?" he said. "I come for you." The guests. A young man and his wife were on a trip to visit his mother. Usually they arrived in time for supper, but they had gotten a late start and now it was getting dark. So they decided to look for a place to stay overnight and go on in the morning. Just off the road, they saw a small house in the woods. Maybe they rent rooms, the wife said, so they stopped to ask. An elderly man and woman came to the door. They didn't rent rooms, they said, but they would be glad to have them stay overnight as their guests. They had plenty of room, and they would enjoy the company. The old woman made coffee and brought out some cake, and the four of them talked for a while. Then the young couple were taken to their room. They again explained that they wanted to pay for this, but the old man said he would not accept any money. The young couple got up early the next morning before their hosts had awakened. On a table near the front door, they left an envelope with some money in it for the room. Then they went on to the next town. They stopped in a restaurant and had breakfast. When they told the owner where they had stayed, he was shocked. "That can't be," he said. "That house burned to the ground, and the man and the woman who lived there died in the fire." The young couple could not believe it, so they went back to the house. Only now, there was no house. All they found was a burned-out shell. They stood staring. r/creepy encounters. User IKEA Lover 3000. Creepy man watching me while babysitting. Before I start, I must say I haven't told many people this. Mostly because it was a very scary experience for me. This happened in Kelowna, Canada in the 80s. I was about 14 and was babysitting at a neighbor's house while the parents were gone. They had a nice house, like most in the neighborhood, and it was right on the corner where two streets connected. My house was right outside a bus stop across from theirs. This happened pretty late at night in the winter, so it was dark out, maybe 11 or 12 at night. I was sitting on the couch when I thought I saw something out the back door. It was one of those glass doors that led to the porch. It was weird though, because I couldn't see much. You know when the lights are on and it's dark out so you can't see anything but black and your reflection? That's what I saw. But I could have sworn it looked like something was there. So I got up and walked close to the window. It definitely looked like something was there, but I still couldn't see. I got closer, still couldn't see. I honestly should have just turned on the lights, but instead I put my face right to the glass and cupped my hands by my eyes to look out. Maybe about 1 inch from my face on the other side of the glass was a man. He looked tall and pale from what I could see, which wasn't much, and he was staring at me very scarily. Keep in mind, he would have been watching from the backyard. Naturally, I jumped back and let out a short scream. But stupid teenage me didn't call the cops. I called my parents instead. My father came over to take a look. There were still footprints in the front and backyard. I don't remember much after that because it just felt like a very unreal experience. You never expect this stuff to happen to you until it does. Anyways, hope you enjoyed this story because I sure didn't enjoy experiencing it. The bride. The minister's daughter had just gotten married. After the wedding ceremony, there was a great feast, with music and dancing and contests and games, even old children's games. When they got to playing hide and seek, the bride decided to hide in her grandfather's trunk up in the attic. "They'll never find me here," she thought. As she was climbing into the trunk, the lid came down and cracked her on the head, and she fell unconscious inside. The lid slammed shut and locked. No one will. High beams. The girl driving the old blue sedan was a senior at the high school. She lived on a farm about 8 miles away and used that car to drive back and forth. She had driven into town that night to see a basketball game. Now she was on her way home. As she pulled away from the school, she noticed a red pickup truck follow her out of the parking lot. A few minutes later, the truck was still behind her. I guess we're going in the same direction, she thought. She began to watch the truck in her mirror. When she changed her speed, the driver of the truck changed his speed. When she passed a car, so did he. Then he turned on his high beams, flooding her car with light. He left them on for almost a minute. He probably wants to pass me, she thought. But she was becoming uneasy. Usually she drove home over a back road. Not too many people went that way. But when she turned onto that road, so did the truck. I've got to get away from him, she thought, and she began to drive faster. Then he turned his high beams on again. After a minute, he turned them off. Then he turned them on again and off again. She drove even faster, but the truck driver stayed right behind her. Then he turned his high beams on again. Once more her car was ablaze with light. What is he doing? She wondered. What does he want? Then he turned them off again. But a minute later he had them on again, and he left them on. At last she pulled into her driveway, and the truck pulled in right behind her. She jumped from the car and ran to the house. "Call the police!" she screamed at her father. Out in the driveway, she could see the driver of the truck. He had a gun in his hand. When the police arrived, they started to arrest him, but he pointed to the girl's car. "You don't want me," he said. "You want him." Crouched behind the driver's seat, there was a man with a knife. As the driver of the truck explained it, the man slipped into the girl's car just before she left the school. He saw it happen, but there was no way he could stop it. He thought about getting the police, but he was afraid to leave her, so he followed her car. Each time the man in the back seat reached up to overpower her, the driver of the truck turned on his high beams. Then the man dropped down, afraid that someone might see him. r/no sleep. User genuinelygrim. My wife forgot to delete her browser history. I can't believe what I found. 4:34 p.m. How to stop husband from cheating. I had only clicked on the history tab to delete the last thing I'd searched for when I noticed the entry. Hurriedly, I finished zipping up my fly and stared at it in bewilderment. Amy and I had been almost too careful. We had never so much as looked at one another in my wife's presence, let alone done anything that could have raised suspicion. There was no way she could have known what was going on, even if she had looked through my phone. With a heavy heart, I'd forced myself to delete any incriminating photos Amy sent me after I was done with them, and we had a strict call-only policy. Amy was our latest hire, and aside from being great at her job, She excelled in garnering male attention. Everyone loved her. She was strikingly beautiful and uninhibited to the point where her energy felt almost carnal, sending all morals and restraints out the window. I tried to ignore her at first, even finding excuses to go home early, but eventually her charming giggle got the better of me too. 4:37 p.m. How much does divorce cost? Droplets of sweat sprang out on my forehead. What? Was my wife planning to divorce me? But why? There was no way she knew about Amy and me. Was there someone else? Was she planning to accuse me of infidelity? All while going at it with some lover boy she'd met at her yoga class? 4:39 p.m. Why do humans feel emotions? I pursed my lips. If by some miracle my wife did know about the affair, I couldn't imagine the way she must have been feeling. I woke up late this morning and found a note on the kitchen table, saying that she didn't want to wake me and that she was out doing her Saturday errands. I almost felt compelled to call her and... oh? I flinched as a large drop of blood landed on the keyboard. What the hell? My first instinct was to look up at the ceiling. Nothing. A strong metallic smell made me come to my senses. I brushed my hand against my face. A bright red smudge sat on my palm. I stared at it, alarmed. I'd never gotten nosebleeds before, aside from the time I got hit in the face with a football in high school. My head raised. I scrambled to my feet and made a dash for the bathroom, my hands cupping my throbbing nose. Once I had managed to stop the bleeding and cleaned myself up, I returned to the computer. 4:44 p.m. Which part of the brain is responsible for love? This was an oddly specific search. I couldn't recall my wife ever being interested in science or biology. I checked the account logged into the browser, just in case. Perhaps this was someone else's history altogether? Or maybe we'd been hacked? No. Seemed like everything was in order. My wife's smiling face stared back at me from the login window. What was she doing searching for brain parts anyway? 4:49 p.m. What is excerebration? What? What was excerebration? Some kind of fancy divorce? I'd never heard of the term in my life. I didn't even hesitate before clicking it, eager to find out what my wife was planning for us. I wish I hadn't. As the results came up on the monitor, my stomach lurched and my gag reflex kicked in. The images were graphic enough for my hand to automatically gravitate towards the return button, but a short paragraph in bold caught my eye. An ancient procedure involving chiseling through the bone of the nose in order to scoop out the brain matter. My heart hammering in my chest, I clicked the back button and scanned the rest of the entries. 5:01 p.m. Can a person live without the hypothalamus? 5:05 p.m. Location of the hypothalamus. 5:11 p.m. How much temazepam is safe? My skin crawled as I read, but I couldn't look away. I was so immersed that I didn't even hear the front door bang. "Honey, I'm home." I stared at the wall, too shocked to reply. What was I meant to say? How was I supposed to ask her about all of this? "Hello?" she called again, her heels clacking towards me. Hey," I choked, throwing the box of tissues into the drawer. How was... Oh, good, she smiled as she appeared in the doorway. How are you? You had quite a lot to drink last night. I stammered. I did? She studied me, as though she wasn't sure whether I was joking or not. What's all this? I asked, gesturing to the computer screen. She joined me at the desk, frowning at the clammy wood surface. What? I pointed at the browsing history, my index finger shaking visibly in the air. Oh, she flushed, 2 pink spots appearing on her cheeks. Well, you did say we could try it, so I had to do a little research, you know? What? I said we could try... What? Oh, she waved her hand dismissively. The except something. You probably know better. My blood ran cold. The excerebration. Karen, what did you do? But before she could say anything, a splash of blood landed on the carpet. And then another one. And another. Karen watched me, her skin growing pale. What? Suddenly, a small fleshy lump escaped my nostril and rolled down the front of my shirt. We both stared at it in shocked silence. Then, my wife screamed, turning on her heel to flee the room, but I caught up to her, pinning her against the wall. Tell me what the fuck you did! She tried to fight me, writhing under my grip, but I held on tight. Blood was streaming into my mouth and down my chin, staining both of our clothes. How can you not remember? She screeched, trying to elbow me in the ribs. Don't you remember what you did? I stared at her panic-stricken face, trying my best to recall any memories from the previous night. No. What did I do? You came home after work and told me you were leaving me for Amy. She sobbed. You said you didn't want to love her, but you did. I stood there quietly, mulling it over, as more pulp splashed onto my stomach. Ew! We need to call you an ambulance! Karen shrieked, trying to pull away. What the fuck is that? Then what happened? I demanded, my heart practically leaping out of my chest. Tell me what you did. What the fuck, John? She screamed. We got drunk, okay? We got really wasted. And then you said you knew of a way to fix this. To fix us. You said there's something called hypothalamus in your brain, and if removed, it would stop you from loving Amy. I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. What the hell was she saying? Had she actually attempted to remove a part of my brain? And... Wait, I whispered. Who's Amy? Her expression made me feel foolish for not remembering. I knew that name. Amy. It sounded so familiar, and yet I couldn't for the life of me put my finger on it. What? What the fuck do you mean? She sounded bewildered. Amy, the girl you were cheating on me with for 6 months? I don't, I mouthed, releasing my wife and crumpling to the floor. I don't remember. Karen stared at me, her white blouse resembling a massacre, her mouth pressed into a thin line. What's happening to me? I whispered. She was silent for a moment, but I could see her eyes brimming with tears. Honey, what if I accidentally hit your hippocampus instead? What? That told me nothing. For fuck's sake, Karen, I'm not a fucking encyclopedia. Enlighten me. What the hell is a hippocampus? Nothing could have prepared me for what she said next. Honey, she sobbed, you're a doctor. It's the memory part of your brain. Downtown. He could not explain what he was doing there, or how he got there, or where he had been earlier. He didn't even know what time it was. He saw a woman walking toward him and stopped her. I'm afraid I forgot my watch, he said, and smiled. Can you tell me the time? When she saw him, she screamed and ran. Then John Sullivan noticed that other people were afraid of him. When they saw him coming, they flattened themselves against a building, or ran across the street to stay out of his way. There must be something wrong with me, John Sullivan thought. I'd better go home. He hailed a taxi, but the driver took one look at him and sped away. John Sullivan did not understand what was going on, and it scared him. Maybe somebody at home can come and get me, he thought. He found a telephone and called his wife, but a voice he did not recognize answered. Is Mrs. Sullivan there? He asked. No, she is at a funeral, the voice said. Mr. Sullivan was killed yesterday in an accident downtown. Something in the woods crawled back to me. r/no sleep. User a random person 123454. Alright, here it goes. I've never posted here before, but what happened to me last weekend still has me rattled. I need to get it off my chest, and maybe, just maybe, someone here can help me make sense of it. I live in a small town in Montana, nestled in the Rockies. My house is just a few miles from a vast expanse of national forest land. It's beautiful, sure, but it can be incredibly isolating. That isolation is part of why I love it. But after what happened, it's also why I'm terrified. Last Saturday, I decided to take a late afternoon hike. There's a trail I frequent, one that winds up to a small clearing overlooking the valley. I brought my dog, Max, a German Shepherd, who's never been spooked by anything in his life. We set off around 3 p.m., figuring we'd be back before sunset. The hike up was uneventful. The forest was serene, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional chirping of birds. Max was his usual self, darting ahead and then circling back to me. It was perfect, exactly why I moved out here. When we reached the clearing, I sat down on a fallen log to catch my breath and enjoy the view. Max was sniffing around, but after a few minutes, he froze. He was staring at the tree line on the opposite side of the clearing. His ears perked up and his body tensed. "What's up, boy?" I asked, trying to see what he was looking at. That's when I noticed it. At first, it was just a shadow moving between the trees. I squinted, thinking maybe it was a deer or something, but then it stepped out into the clearing. It looked like a person, but not quite. It was tall and gaunt, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. Its skin was pale, almost grayish, and its eyes were completely black. Max started growling, a low, menacing sound. that I'd never heard from him before. The figure took a step forward, and that's when I noticed it was mimicking my movements from earlier, almost like it was replaying a tape of me walking. Then it spoke. Max. "What's up, boy?" The voice was mine. Exactly mine. I felt a chill run down my spine, and Max started barking furiously. The figure stopped, tilted its head, and then turned around, disappearing back into the trees. I didn't stick around to see if it would come back. Grabbed Max by the collar and practically ran down the trail. It was getting dark, and every sound made me jump. Max kept looking back, growling intermittently. We made it home just as the last light was fading. I locked all the doors and windows, something I rarely do out here. I tried to calm myself down, rationalizing that maybe it was just some sort of trick of the light, or maybe another hiker messing with me. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made me jump, and Max was restless, pacing around the living room. Around 2 a.m., just as I was starting to doze off, I heard it. "Max. What's up, boy?" It was faint, almost like a whisper, but it was definitely my voice. It was coming from outside, near the tree line. I didn't sleep at all after that. When the sun finally came up, I took Max and drove into town. I needed to be around people, somewhere that didn't feel so exposed. I told my friend Jake about it, and he just laughed, saying I'd been out in the woods too long. Maybe he's right. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But I can't shake the feeling that something out there saw me, remembered me, and called back in my own voice. I haven't been back to that trail since. Every time I think about going for a hike, I hear that voice again, and I can't bring myself to leave the house. I don't know what I saw, but I'm sure of one thing. It saw me too. Has anyone else experienced something like this? I need to know I'm not losing my mind. Cold as clay. A farmer had a daughter for whom he cared more than anything on earth. She fell in love with a farm hand named Jim, but the farmer did not think Jim was good enough for his daughter. To keep them apart, he sent her to live with her uncle on the other side of the country. Soon after she left, Jim got sick and he wasted away and died. Everyone said he died of a broken heart. The farmer felt so guilty about Jim's death. He could not tell his daughter what had happened. She continued to think about Jim and the life they might have had together. One night, many weeks later, there was a knock on her uncle's door. When the girl opened the door, Jim was standing there. "Your father asked me to get you," he said. "I came on his best horse." "Is there anything wrong?" she asked. "I don't know," he said. She packed a few things and they left. She rode behind him, clinging to his waist. Soon he complained of a headache. "It aches something terrible," he told her. She put her hand on his forehead. "Why are you as cold as clay?" she said. "I hope you are not ill." And she wrapped her handkerchief around his head. They traveled so swiftly that in a few hours they reached the farm. The girl quickly dismounted and knocked on the door. Her father was startled to see her. "Didn't you send for me?" she asked. "No, I didn't," he said. She turned to Jim, but he was gone, and so was the horse. They went to the stable to look for them. The horse was there. It was covered with sweat and trembling with fear, but there was no sign of Jim. Terrified, her father told her the truth about Jim's death. Then, quickly, he went to see Jim's parents. They decided to open his grave. The corpse was in its coffin, but around its head they found the girl's handkerchief. r/no sleep. User voids. I've been trying to leave my bathroom for the past 30 minutes. I can't leave my bathroom. About 30 minutes ago, I got out of the shower and dried off, put on my PJs, opened the door and walked out, only to find myself back in my bathroom, staring at the closed door. I stopped and tried to rationalize what had just happened to me. I convinced myself that I had simply imagined that I had opened the door and stepped out, so I tried again. I pushed the door handle down, opened it, stepped out, and yet again found myself in my bathroom, standing in front of a closed door. This has happened to me every single time I've tried to leave. I keep my phone in the bathroom with me when I'm showering. I live alone, so I keep it with me just in case, for safety. The first thing I did was call my parents. My dad didn't pick up, but my mom did. I tried to explain the situation to her, but she couldn't seem to understand how I was trapped in my bathroom if the door could open. She seemed convinced that I must mean that my bathroom door's lock was broken and I was trapped inside. Regardless, she said that she would be over ASAP. She only lives a 15-minute drive away, so she should be here any moment. I'm sat leaning against my bathtub, looking out the open bathroom door into my landing. I opened it this time, but didn't try to step out. Everything looks normal. My bedroom door is closed just as I left it. The cupboard door closed as well. The stairs leading down to the hallway and the front door, all normal. The door is shut. I don't have any recollection of how it shut, when it shut, only that it must have happened in the last few seconds after I wrote that last paragraph. I've just reread and reread that paragraph. It's proof that I'm not going crazy and imagining this. My mom just texted me to ask if I'm in the house. I said yes, of course I am. I'm trapped in the bathroom. That's the whole reason that I called you here. This is what she sent. Mom, why aren't you saying anything? Me, what do you mean? Mom, are you even in there? Me, yes, I'm in here. Are you here? Mom, I'm outside the bathroom door. I've been calling your name. I don't understand. I can't hear anything through the door. I'm going to open it. I can see my landing, my stairs, my front door, but no Mom. I tried to walk out, but it was fruitless, back staring at the closed bathroom door. My mom tried the handle of the door from her side, but it won't open. She brought tools to unscrew the lock. She said she's doing it now, but I can't hear anything, and I can't see the handle moving. Okay, Mom texted me to say the lock is taken out, but the door still won't open on her side. She looked through the circular hole in the door where the lock was, but just saw my bathroom. Empty. There's no hole on my side of the door. The handle and lock are intact. I have no idea what's happening, or how I can get out. After much convincing my mom that I am in fact in here, she said she is calling someone to possibly knock the door down. I'm worried that once they do that, they will find an empty bathroom, and yet I will still be here, trapped in my bathroom. There's no plug sockets in here. Never mind my phone charger. My phone will die at some point. I'm already on 24%. When it runs out, I might lose my only point of contact with the rest of the world. I don't know what to do. Mom's left now to get help. I'm sat wondering what I can do. I tried to break the door down myself. I knew it wouldn't work, but I had to try. I remember reading once on Reddit that you shouldn't use your shoulder. You should try to kick the door by the lock because it's the weak point. It didn't work. I'm not sure any part of this door has a weak point now. The window is small, and I'm not sure if I'd actually be able to fit out of it. Scratch that. The window won't open either. There are locks on the windows in my house. You can lock them with a little key. But I never received any when I moved in, so I've never been able to lock them. It's locked now, though. It's got one of those white plastic cheap blinds covering it. I ended up ripping it down. It's pulled some plaster down with it, but now I can get at the window better. It's straight above the toilet, so I am kneeling on top of the toilet lid, yanking at the window handle. It won't. Wait, it opened. I didn't notice how dark it was outside. It shouldn't be dark. It's midday. I looked around, desperately trying to see anyone. No one's around. Everything looks kind of muted. I can't describe it, nor can I describe the deep-seated feeling of dread and wrongness as I look out into my neighborhood. My instincts are telling me not to, but I stick my head out to look down to where I could possibly drop to. My window's closed. I never felt myself move, but my window's closed. Even the fucking plastic blind is back in place. I'm sat on the floor now, as far away from the window and door as I can get. I feel sick. Mom came back, along with her work friend. He helped her unscrew the hinges and remove the door. I'm not in there. They can't see me. My mom sent a photo of her inside the bathroom, with no me. She thinks this has all been a joke, and is refusing to reply to my texts or answer my calls. I'm on 14% battery. I don't know if I will ever get to leave. This might be my only chance to say goodbye to my mom, but she won't answer her phone. Edit. I ripped down the shower curtain, and yet I'm staring at it right now, hung up, hanging over the side of my bath. I looked out the window again. I think I heard a rumbling. Low, quiet rumbling. I haven't opened the window since. My phone is on 1%. If I get out, I will update this post. If no edit comes, assume I'm still here. The Haunted House. One time, a preacher went to see if he could put a haunt to rest at a house in his settlement. The house had been haunted for about 10 years. Several people had tried to stay there all night, but they always would get scared out by the haunt. So this preacher took his Bible and went to the house, went on in, built himself a good fire, and lit a lamp. Sat there reading the Bible. Then, just before midnight, he heard something start up in the cellar, walking back and forth, back and forth. Then it sounded like somebody was trying to scream and got choked out. Then there was a lot of thrashing around and struggling, and finally everything got quiet. The old preacher took up his Bible again, but before he could start reading, he heard footsteps coming up the cellar stairs. He sat, watching the door to the cellar, and the footsteps kept coming closer and closer. He saw the doorknob turn, and when the door began to open, he jumped up and hollered, "What do you want?" The door shut back easy-like, and there wasn't a sound. The preacher was trembling a little, but he finally opened the Bible and read a while. Then he got up and laid the Bible on the chair and went to mending the fire. Then the haunt started walking again, and step, 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 up the cellar stairs. The old preacher sat watching the door, saw the doorknob turn and the door open. It looked like a young woman. He backed up and said, "Who are you? What do you want?" The haunt sort of swayed, like she didn't know what to do, and then she just faded out. The old preacher waited, and when he didn't hear any more noises, he went over and shut the door. He was sweating and trembling all over, but he was a brave man, and he thought he'd be able to see it through. So he turned his chair to where he could watch, and he sat down and waited. It wasn't long before he heard the haunt start up again, slowly. Step, 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 closer and closer. Step, step, and it was right at the door. The preacher stood up and held his Bible out before him. Then the knob slowly turned, and the door opened wide. This time the preacher spoke quiet-like. He said, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, who are you and what do you want?" The haunt came right across the room, straight to him, and took hold of his coat. It was a young woman, about 20 years old. Her hair was torn and tangled, and the flesh was dropping off her face, so he could see the bones and part of her teeth. She had no eyeballs, but there was a sort of blue light way back in her eye sockets, and she had no nose to her face. Then she started talking. It sounded like her voice was coming and going with the wind blowing it. She told him how her lover had killed her for her money and buried her in the cellar. She said if the preacher would dig up her bones and bury her properly, she could rest. Then she told him to take the end joint of the little finger from her left hand and to lay it in the collection plate at the next church meeting, and he'd find out who had murdered her. And she said, "If you come back here once more after that, you'll hear my voice at midnight, and I'll tell you where my money is hid, and you can give it to the church." The haunt sobbed like she was tired, and she sunk down toward the floor and was gone. The preacher found her bones and buried them in the graveyard. The next Sunday, the preacher put the finger bone in the collection plate, and when a certain man happened to touch it, it stuck to his hand. The man jumped up and rubbed and scraped and tore at that bone, trying to get it off. Then he went to screaming, like he was going crazy. Well, he confessed to the murder, and they took him off to jail. After the man was hung, the preacher went back to that house one midnight, and the haunt's voice told him to dig under the hearth rock. He did, and he found a big sack of money. And where that haunt had held on to his coat, the print of those bony fingers was burned right into the cloth. It never did come out. The Girl Who Stood on a Grave. Some boys and girls were at a party one night. There was a graveyard down the street, and they were talking about how scary it was. "Don't ever stand on a grave after dark," one of the boys said. "The person inside will grab you. He'll pull you under." "That's not true," one of the girls said. "It's just a superstition." "I'll give you $1 if you stand on a grave," said the boy. "A grave doesn't scare me," said the girl. "I'll do it right now." The boy handed her his knife. "Stick this knife in one of the graves," he said. "Then we'll know you were there." The graveyard was filled with shadows and was as quiet as death. "There is nothing to be scared of," the girl told herself. But she was scared anyway. She picked out a grave and stood on it. Then quickly she bent over and plunged the knife into the soil, and she started to leave. But she couldn't get away. Something was holding her back. She tried a second time to leave, but she couldn't move. She was filled with terror. "Something's got me!" she screamed, and she fell to the ground. When she didn't come back, the others went to look for her. They found her body sprawled across the grave. Without realizing it, she had plunged the knife through her skirt and had pinned it to the ground. It was only the knife that held her. She had died of fright.